Good evening. I am Norfolk born, and after many years all over the place, I live back in Norfolk. So for a bit of light-heartedness, having been serious all day, I'm going to share with you from this book. It's called Norfolk Ghosts and Legends. It's by Polly Howat, produced in 1993, Countryside Books, Newbury, Berkshire, and it's for David Mould with Her Best Wishes, first published in 1993. And I've chosen to read, I will read the introduction, it's only a quarter of a page, and she obviously lived in Wisbech, and I was raised in Downham Market, so it's not too far away, and I now live near Hunstanton. The introduction. Folklore is an important subject. It not only allows us an insight into the traditions of our forefathers, but also helps us to identify with them and with our landscape. People still claim to encounter the supernatural and have strange, inexplicable experiences. Others have wonderful family stories and memories, which they have shared generously with Polly. Happily, the subject is not dead. Many still enjoy both the old tales and the modern ones, which are being passed on in pubs when they're open, schools when they're open, workplaces when they're open, and dining rooms when they're open. Remember, this is 2021 and nothing much is open. Instead of headless horsemen, our modern anxieties are manifested in urban myths and legends. Much of our late 20th century anguish is evident in these semi-plausible stories. We're on the 7th of April 2021 for those who wish to know. Although less rich than many of the old localized subjects, the modern ones still play an important part in current folk culture, when we can get it back. This book concentrates mainly on the country's traditional ghosts and legends, with some recent updates. It is written for all age groups, since I am aware that children, the storytellers of the future, are also interested in the subject. Some of the tales will be well known, others less so, and some will be new to you. I've also intended a glossary of Norfolk words to add to your enjoyment. Sorry to say that I haven't got a very good Norfolk accent, because my parents sent me to a convent in King's Lynn, and I had elocution lessons while I was there, because I was a bit of a tomboy, having 3 brothers, so they thought they'd make a lady of me, but I can't say they achieved that. But I did learn to speak the Queen's English, and I never learned how to speak Norfolk accent. Hey, you got a light, boy, is about all I can say. So this wonderful dialect, which I wish I could do it, could soon be a thing of the past. Well, I hear some around about, but most of the voices are from Middle England and London. Thanks to standard English and our fast-moving cosmopolitan lifestyles, should this happen, it will be a tremendous loss. I mean, a lot of the people who live in this building can't understand the one Norfolk man in his 90s, real Norfolk man, I mean, there are others, but he is so, broad with his language, they can't understand him. It's like to them he's talking a foreign language. I understand it, so I should. I was born in Norfolk. So I'm now going to continue. I've chosen the first story from page 8, a wonderful place called BACTON. But the reason I chose it, you'll know, is the title, The True Cross. On a clear night, visitors to BACTON, 11 miles southeast of Cromer, it's near Sheringham as well, could be forgiven for thinking they were in fairyland. Such are the myriad twinkling lights surrounding the huge North Sea gas turbine. What a contrast it is compared with the stark welcome which must have greeted the hordes of pilgrims who once made their way to Bromhole Priory nearby. It was founded in 1113 by William de Glandeville as a cell for the Cluniac monks at Castle Acre Priory. Not far from me, is it? Its ruins today stand on private land at the top of Abbey Street, but can be easily seen from the road. The place was poor and humble until a Norfolk priest named Hugh, who had been a chaplain to the Emperor Baldwin of Constantinople, paid a visit to the 13th century. In the 13th century, he brought with him what he claimed was a piece of the true cross of Calvary, stained with the blood of Christ. It is said that Hugh of Norfolk had stolen this, along with the other divine relics, after the death of the previous owner, the Emperor himself. The great man had always carried this wondrous holy rood when he went into battle. One day he forgot his talisman. He was slain and his army defeated. Crafty Hugh seized his chance and made off with the sacred booty. He had travelled across Europe offering this and other mementos for sale, but his asking price for the relics of the true cross was too high, even for the wealthiest monasteries. When most of his money was used up and times were getting hard for the wandering monk, he arrived at the impoverished Bromholm Priory. Worn out from his journeying so far, the priest desperately wanted to return to his roots, and his only wish was to take refuge in a Norfolk monastery. That's how we all feel when we've been away. We want to come back to Norfolk. By now his one remaining treasure was less of a monetary value than a means of satisfying this need. Eventually, a deal was struck with the abbot of Bromholm, who received the precious relic free of charge in return for Hugh's unconditional admittance into his community. Immediately, the fortunes of this almost unknown religious house changed. Many miracles were claimed by the touching of the ancient pieces of wood. 39 people were brought back from the dead. 19 blind people had their eyesight restored. Lepers were cured of their disease. The list of wonders was long, and the pieces of the true cross brought great wealth and fame to Bromholm. For a time, It even rivaled Walsingham. That's where we all still go. I go, others go, many come from all over the world to go there and watch it on the internet. As a centre of pilgrimage, and it was endowed with royal privileges. By the Holy Rood of Bromholm became a binding medieval oath. In the literature of that time, Piers Plowman's tradesmen beseeched it to bring him out of debt, while Chaucer's miller's daughter also called on the cross to help her. Bromholm enjoyed its great prosperity until 1424, when a visitor deliberately threw the relic into the fire. As the true cross turned to ashes, so did the popularity of this famous priory. There was nothing left to attract the pilgrims and their large financial offerings. No more miracles, nothing but the established routine of monastic life. Bromholm quickly reverted to its former anonymity and eventually shared the fate of other monastic houses with the dissolution in 1536. This was the end of the priory, whose fame and prosperity came from a holy artifact and died with its destruction. The stone ruins give no hint of the wonders which drew such crowds: life from death, sight from blindness, and all those other miracles performed not far from the lap of the cold North Sea. I'll read this little bit here. The Long COASTGUARDSMAN, because it's part of the BACTON history. The 3-mile coastal path linking BACTON with Mundesley is said to be the old haunt of a certain invisible spectre known as the Long COASTGUARDSMAN. He has not made his presence known for a long time, but according to tradition, he always set out from BACTON to Mundesley at the stroke of midnight on stormy, moonless nights. Although never seen, he sang and shouted at the top of his voice when gales lashed at this northeast Norfolk coast. Then he laughed terrifyingly when there was a lull in the wind. Sometimes his loud cries for help echoed around this dreadful route, but people were always too scared to save him. Who would have gone out too scared? Who would have gone out in that vile weather at the dead of night to help the invisible Long COASTGUARDSMAN who shrieked like a storm force 10? Long COASTGUARDSMAN who shrieked like a storm force 10? His previous human identity drowned at sea in a terrible storm, or perhaps met with a fatal accident on that path. The storm must have reminded the fishing communities of their vulnerability to the elements. Travellers battered and bent, almost double, picking their way through the dark night. Lanterns flickering, horrid shadows, or suddenly going out. The eerie whistling with wind forcing its way through tightly shut windows and doors. Indeed, who would willingly leave their shelter today to walk the path from BACTON to MUNDESLEY in a raging gale? Thank you for listening. I might read some more from this book one day. You'll see. It's called Norfolk Ghosts and Legends. That'll be the title, and another part of this area, or part of Norfolk somewhere, they'll come creeping in the night. Good night and God bless. Thank you for listening.